Welcome to this broadcast. My name is Paul. I'm a recovered addict. I live in Peterhead in Scotland, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'm Ashley. I'm a recovered drug addict. Thank you. Calling from Thr in Cambridgeshire. Thanks.
Wonderful. And is it snowy down there today?
Yeah, it's very icy and very cold, but it looks like it's going to snow. But yeah, nice one.
We've got a thorough carpet of glorious snow here as well, Ashley. Well, we're really pleased to be here today to carry a message of hope, faith and courage to recovering addicts. Today's topic of this broadcast is, so I've recovered, what next? And we're going to be talking about the life of someone that's got clear of drink and drugs and is learning to live clean and sober. On the screen, we're going to have various readings. There's going to be information about other resources. We're going to have on the screen a chapter from our wonderful book, Alcoholics Anonymous, often called The Big Book. There's also going to be a page with lots of meetings that you can attend. There are thousands of Cocaine Anonymous and other 12-step meetings on every single week around the world. So please check out those screens, and bear in mind you can pause, rewind, or come back to this podcast at any time. Also, if you want to get involved in the conversation wherever you see this posted on WhatsApp, Skype, intherooms.com, or indeed YouTube, feel free to reach out in the chat and we'll get back to you. You can connect with us and thousands of other folks who have recovered or are recovering in meetings. So if you're wondering what to do next, check out the other podcasts, pop along to some meetings in person and online, and hear more of the message that sets folk free. So without further ado, Ashley, today's topic, so I've recovered, what now? And I remember a lad said this to me a little while ago, what should I do now? And my response was, well, that's the right question. What should you do now? What should I do now? And the answer is we have to do something. Would you agree, Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, Paul, and I think, I identify with what you're saying, and, I suppose when I was in active addiction and, much like everyone else within this, program, it's, we get to look at what we can do within recovery and get honest with things and, do our 12 steps. And then, we begin to help others. And then it's, for me also, I think it's just looking at, sort of interests that interest me and getting into some, positive action and, using the time that we all have spare now to get into something and feel good about it, I think. But yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think first things first, we by the grace of God, we have what I like to call a conspiracy of circumstances. Things occur in our lives, and our response to them is such that we have a desire to get clean. For anyone that's still using drugs or indeed the drug alcohol of any type, pill, potion, powder, rock, or liquid, we absolutely have a solution. You never need to drink and drug again. It is possible to learn to live clean and to learn to live on a spiritual basis. Honesty and willingness being the essentials to get you going. Having got free through a desire to get clean and a desire to stay clean, and that can be difficult. It really can. It can be a painful place because you've got the two desires within you. You've got the desire to get clean and the desire to get high. And the old Indian proverb, whichever wolf you feed gets stronger. So if you stay clean and come along to meetings and read the literature on a daily basis and have phone calls with folks who have also recovered or are recovering from this insidious illness, your faith and trust that you too can get and stay clean will increase. Your trust that the steps, the program, the fellowship, the literature, the meetings can enhance your life, and you can learn to live clean for a mood and mind altering substances increases through being part of the process. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Paul. And yeah, I think like you were, just mirroring what you were saying, really. Just, it's about, being at a place where you're, I think where you're willing to look at these, these suggested things that are outlined in the book, and being honest with yourself, and then eventually, sharing it with somebody else, and being a part of society again, and being productive, and just being, just being able to be, to realize that you can't, I don't know, you can't drink and use like the Joe Bloggs down the street, and I think that was a big part of my recovery, to be all right with that, and like this meeting topic, what, I'm recovered, what next? And I think for me is just widening my, my mindset, and the way I think, as a part of me being in recovery, to progress within, my life and the fellowship, really. But yeah, no, it's a good thing. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons for this topic is that when I would get clean, going back quite some time mercifully now, I invariably eventually would pick up again because I didn't have things in place. I didn't have a home group. I didn't have a commitment to literature and personal spiritual literature. I didn't have responsibilities in recovery. I didn't have that sense of accountability, and because those things weren't in place, actually, the time and place came, and I would use again. Okay, sometimes it would be years of continuous sobriety, but the time would come. So it's important to sort of have things in place. In my experience, it's simply not enough to quit using and then hope for the best. Some folks do that, and I'm quite sure occasionally that does work for some folks, but usually for chronic drug addicts and chronic alcoholics, the only thing I've seen work, Ashley, is a daily program of action. Now, I've never met anyone that perfectly keeps the program. What we do have to do, I think, is a measure of the suggestions on a daily basis. In my experience, is the more of them you do, the happier and freer you'll be, and the less that you do, the less happy and less free you are. And of course, the overarching feature through all this is the grace and mercy of the loving God, who of course is giving us our next breath and keeping 8,000 million humans alive right now. Everyone is precious and is being preserved in grace. So there's a bigger picture over anything we could say on a 45-minute broadcast. But it's very important to get into action because of the insidious nature. Let's just talk about this for a few minutes. The awful nature of the condition. One of the reasons why I love our book that we're going to be looking at on the screen in a few minutes, Alcoholics Anonymous, I can call the big book, is because I've come to see that a drug is a drug is a drug, whether it's alcohol, heroin, weed, cocaine, crack, speed, whatever it is. The mental obsession, the phenomena of craving is very, very similar, if not exactly the same. So therefore, addiction is alcoholism and vice versa. And for me, one of the best, if not the best book on the topic is the big book. And principally learn more about your own alcoholism. I suppose principally go through the 12 steps with someone who knows what they're talking about. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree, Paul. I like you, again, like what you were saying, it's a case of, opening your support network up to, to just a bit more than what you think, you need to be doing. And I found that very useful as, doing a meet, doing, just keeping in recovery, doing, not thinking, this is just my experience, thinking, oh, now I'm kind of, recovered and I've been through the steps and I've got a sponsor. I can just sort of slack it off a bit. And like what you were saying, I believe that it's a constant thing, and, constant ways of improving within this to be, most effective, just to be most effective around recovery, I think.
Yeah. The insidious nature of the disease of addiction is such that if persons don't actively engage in their sobriety, then unfortunately the obsession can come back and they can use again. And, for chronic alcoholic addicts, to use again is the road to death. And the road to life is one of commitment and devotion, which we'll probably talk about later in step 3. But the insidious nature of the first drink or the first drug, the reality that if you don't treat your alcoholism, it will treat you. Not necessarily with drink and drugs. First the bedevilment, delusion, resentment, anger, fear, arrogance, pride, being argumentative or getting into sarcasm and mockery and hateful, and being at enmity with other folk, seeing folk as against you, being enemies in your mind with folk, all this stuff very often, and indeed more often than not, precedes the picking up of drink and drugs. Indeed, it's been said, hasn't it, that the physical picking up of drink and drugs is towards the end of the relapse. The relapse usually begins days, often weeks prior. But due to the insidious nature of addiction, we have to do something. It's not enough to just quit and hope for the best. And it's quite a task to try and convey all this information to new folk. The awfulness of the disease and the need to get involved in the 12 steps. But you really, you have to really learn to pray the morning, ask for wisdom, serenity, and power from God, and then get into action.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely true, Paul. It's I think, like you said again, it's getting into this action process and being honourable, I guess, to God, and being, willing to do a few different things. Because some days I might feel all right, but then it's the other days when I'm not feeling all right that I need to look at and, see what I need to amend, really, within my behaviours and my, the way that I, act towards others. And recovery enables us to be a part of, good natured behaviour. And I think it's, as soon as I put this down, or I think that I've got it, or, I don't need to be here anymore, I think that's when I'm in a bit of bother, really. But
absolutely,
yeah,
it's prayer and action, isn't it? We've got to be ready to take action. I mean, let's talk about the problem from there too. So, what happens is persons quit. They perhaps rock up to a meeting a couple of times a week. They've got various motivations: financial, mental, relationship, physical consequences. So they've got some kind of desire to quit, and perhaps they're running on self-will or self-knowledge. Perhaps they've got a partner or a family member that's pressuring them to stay clean, and that works for a period of time. But then usually within a short time, they're drunk or high again, or an awful spree with terrible consequences. And as we're reading there on the bottom of the page, they have the awful awakening to face the hideous 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And the truth is that probably twice a week, maybe that's a conservative, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, Ashley, I'm actually talking to a person who is in that state, fresh back from a spree, a drinking and drugging spree or binge, emerging remorseful, wondering what's happened. Well, An addict or an alcoholic that is clean sober is like a fish out of water, gasping for air, unless they can get the power of God and the wisdom of God and the serenity and courage of God active in their lives, then invariably they drink and drink. You see, so it's quite a complex point, really, what someone ought to do, and the motivation to do it, to explain to them is often a difficult thing, because the very nature of the problem of addiction is delusion. The delusion that I can manage my life on drugs. You see, so because of the delusion and because of its nature being threefold: spiritual, mental, and physical, unless you address all three areas, it's unlikely if you're a chronic addict or chronic alcoholic that you'll stay clean and sober, because of the awfulness of being under the influence of the devil, alcoholism, the disease, the malady, the problem, the lower power. Persons that are in a deluded state, their thinking is wonky and their living is wonky. You see, and the wonky thinking comes in, and the delusion is that actually it's not unmanageable. You can actually manage, and millions are pursuing that lie and that delusion to the gates of insanity and death as we speak, aren't they?
Yeah, that's correct, Paul. And I think it's this, constant thought or ways and means of getting more, and being, just like what you were saying, being in that constant fear of, where am I going to get it? How am I going to get it? And, and I keep bringing it back to my experience, but I really had to, within this, to kind of suss out if it was, if I was needed to kind of be here, I guess. And I, suddenly realized that, this is what I need, if anyone relates listening. And, I can't seem to manage to kind of stop on my own accord. And, when I came to read A Vision for You, it was, it's a vision for me, and whoever's reading it, A Vision for You, it's telling you that, this is a vision for you. And it tells us what the problem is. And it's a very good part of the book, I believe, Paul.
Well, that's right, absolutely. And as I say, it's a fine balance, actually, because we're not like militant members, right? You're in the army now, you must do this, you must do that, you must do that, call me tonight. But at the same time, early Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the origins of Narcotics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous, when you went along to their meetings, it was usually because you had a serious problem. You would be assigned a sponsor. You'd be assigned a sponsor there and then. There was no options. If you rocked up to a meeting in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, you would be assigned a sponsor. And you'd be starting the steps quick time. Now I don't quite go along with that in regards of enforcing that on folk, but at the same time, I get the ethos, and I've also seen, even recently, folks that take the suggestion, get a sponsor quick time, and get into, and for me, actually, now I work sort of like 2.5, 3 weeks is an ideal to get someone through a thorough round of the 12 steps in 25, 30 hours work. That's how I do it. I can do it quicker, but I believe that gives the best results, to keep the continuity, to keep the consistency, to keep the commitment. And that produces the essential psychic change, the emotional rearrangement, the change in perspective, the shift in worldview. In my experience, that's the prime thing. But of course, as I say, 12-step meetings are public meetings. Everyone's welcome. Sponsor, no sponsor, steps, no steps, drunk as a lord, sober as a judge, high as a kite. Everyone is welcome, period. It's a program of mercy. Folks can experience help and assurance and assistance wherever they're at in their recovery journey, and that's very, very important.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's true, Paul. I think it, like you say, I think it's just, showing showing this kind of willingness to be involved with it, in with recovery, and just being, I think it's all personal to everyone. Everyone's got their own personal kind of sort of feelings around it, and it's, everyone's experiences is different, and I think it's all to do with, what, I had to kind of realize that it's about this accountability side of it, and no one's gonna kind of make me do this. It's now I've put the drugs down, I have to, be prepared to do some things that I wasn't really prepared to do before. And recovery can give, people this, that, that are recovered and, wanting to look at this in a bit more detail. And I think it's about just, I think it's about, continuing the passion and the wanting to do this, and I think that wanting has to come from from within me as well, to put some, action in. And and that humility factor of just, listening to people that, are saying, I don't know what to do, but I ask my higher power, and and he takes me there. And I think it's just this, it's that will. I think it's that willing, Paul, isn't it, to do something about your recovery, I guess.
Absolutely, and to learn more about your own personal alcoholism. You can't locate a solution till you're familiar with the problem. I worked as a mechanic for a good while, and you had to know what the problem was precisely. You didn't randomly buy spare parts and just have a go at bolting them on and hope it would fix it. In the same way, you have to be aware of what the problem is in order to locate a solution. So in the first instance, when folks are brand new into abstinence-based recovery, they do well to learn about their problem, and the problem centers in the mind. Now, on this channel, we have, I think there's over 60 broadcasts now, Ashley, and I know you're on several of them.
Yeah.
They are too. We've got one called An Entire Psychic Change, The Spiritual Malady. There's another one called, well, there's several meetings. One of the newer things we started doing, and you participated in 2 or 3 of them, we sort of do a meeting on YouTube, and there's several of those recorded meetings on this channel. The ABCs of Addiction is the other one, and they discuss in detail those topics, and they can be found on this very channel on YouTube. So please, listen to those broadcasts as well. On this one, it's more in general terms of what to do once we get clean, and we've covered the topic in the first instance. Ideally find yourself a sponsor and take their direction and get through the 12 steps of recovery, so you can lose the obsession to drink and drug yourself to destruction, and then you find a new way to live. So in the first instance, after having gone through the 12 steps, you will have had a spiritual awakening, an internal shift, and grown in understanding of what the problem is and what the solution is. Hopefully, you would have found a home group. Ideally, you'd be popping along to face-to-face meetings on at least a weekly basis, and Zoom meetings, particularly in early recovery, 2 or 3 times a week as a minimum, and sharing at least 2 or 3 times a week. So you're taking part in your recovery, and you're feeling a part of instead of a part from. Now, in meetings, let's talk about meetings and the importance of meeting attendance. In meetings, actually, we're reminded of what the problem is, right? Which is a problem of our thinking.
Yeah.
And our thinking is closely connected as to whether we're connected with God or the lower power, with sobriety or addiction. So the problem is centers in the mind, you see. So in meetings, we're reminded what the problem is and what the solution is: connection with God and connection with others, and a daily program of action. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's true, Paul. It's about identification, and the meeting side of it is just attending it and just sharing your experience within drug addiction, and identification with what others are saying, rather than not thinking that I can identify. It's just like what we were saying earlier, if it is what the book describes you are, I think you would get identification within these meetings, and being a part of it, and doing some service, and just, doing something within recovery, within the meetings, and within getting like Paul was saying, getting into a home group, and getting a support network on the go, a few sort of people that you can ring on a frequent basis, and reading the book, finding a chapter, and or if there is a face-to-face meetings within the area, connecting with local sort of recovered addicts that can inspire you to stay in recovery, I think, Paul.
Well, that's right. And I think the important thing is to learn to live according to spiritual principles. And if you go through around the 12 steps, you'll learn about things like acceptance and faith and trust in the process, the literature, meetings, the fellowship, and your fellows in recovery. You'll also learn how to walk in love and truth and light and grace, and be prayerful and thoughtful in what you do. And the beauty of the steps is that God gave Bill Wilson great wisdom in the wording of the steps. In step 12, for example, it says, having had a spiritual awakening. What is a spiritual awakening? It's an internal shift, a change of worldview. As a result of these steps, as a result of working the steps, we try, that's it, we try to carry a message, Ashley, which is what we're doing this morning, and we try to practice principles. That's it. We try to carry a message, we try to practice principles, and we carry that message as part of a support network. What is that? Well, it's about half a dozen folks of the same sex who care about your sobriety, and you care about those, and you maintain some kind of connection with them, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And if they need to call someone and they perhaps can't get their sponsor on their phone, they have other numbers they can ring. And the reason for the importance of a sobriety group around you is because of the insidious nature of temptation. You see, because of the thinking of an alcoholic addict when it comes to drinking drugs is a little bit warped and wonky. You see, the simple equation to use and drink is a very, very normal equation for an alcoholic addict. You see, and only the power of God and a program of action is going to give you the ability to easily control the desire to drink and drug. And so in meetings, we learn about all these things, don't we?
Yeah, no, we do, Paul.
I think the essence is connection with God. We talked briefly of the threefold problem, which is connection with alcoholism, the lower power, the devil, the yang, and that results in wrong thinking, which results in wrong living. Connection with the creator, the source, God, results in right thinking, results in right living. That's the threefold solution. Now, learning to live a life based on prayer is very, very important. To ask for serenity, courage, and wisdom and sobriety in the morning, to stay in a prayerful state throughout the day. When you attend meetings, to attend in a prayerful mode, a contemplative, reflective mode, looking for the similarities, not the differences, looking to learn more about the problem in order to learn more about the solution. So moving on from the topic of meetings, I think then we have the importance of working with others. the essential nature of staying connected with folks in recovery, which of course we do in meetings, and very often before and after meetings, in my experience, has been very important as well. And then taking numbers and building and maintaining that support group. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree, Paul. I think it's, when we come into recovery, we are able to build a support network up for for people that have recovered, and we gain their numbers. But I think also as as recovered drug addicts, we can also build more of a support network up with our fellow sponsees, or people that are in the same position as what we're in, or just the people that are still trying to stop. And I think it's all about building the support network up still as being a recovered drug addict. I think what I've become to realize is that because I'm recovered as being meaning I'm doing this stuff because I am recovered, which means that I'm a part of recovery. It doesn't mean that I can't do any less or any more. I'm still the same as what I was when I came in, but I think it's all to do with that I've been, we get, I'm speaking as everybody really, we get given this chance to progress in recovery, and working with others is the next opportunity that we have as being recovered addicts, and showing them what we've done and what we can do. And I think it's I think someone mentioned it to me probably a year or two ago. I think it was someone in recovery, learn to listen and listen to learn. And I think that took a big part of my inspiration to carry this on. But yeah, I think that's correct, isn't it, Paul? I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I think moving on to another topic, the re-engagement with normal life. This is a bridge to normal living. We don't become robots, nor do we become addicted to meetings. We learn to take pleasure in a daily program of action. We learn to enjoy going on to meetings and seeing our fellows. We learn to live clean. And a big part of that is re-entering normal living. Now, in the fellowship of AACA and NA folks, are a wide variety. You get homeless, crack and smack muggers and burglars, and weekend bingers, and everything in between. And you often get persons that used to be one and became the other. So you get it's a very broad church, and anyone can get and stay clean. They really can. My point is that some folks, their re-engagement with normal living and ordinary society is more drastic than others. See what I mean? So if someone's, for example, I worked with a man recently who was homeless. He got into a terrible, terrible state, homeless. So his re-engagement with normal life was more drastic than, say, someone with 2.2 children, a car on the drive, weekend binging problem. But either way around, we have to become responsible, productive members of society, and that is a process, not an event. And as a part of that, through the steps, we make restitution. We admit our shortcomings, and we approach those we've harmed, and we're willing to make amends with them all, you see. And that would include financial amends. So many of us, we pursue new jobs, or we're fortunate enough to keep the jobs we have. And so we become responsible. Talk about that for a minute, Ashley. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's true, Paul. I think like what you were saying, we become, once we've recovered and we're in this still as a program, we become responsible, persons or people. Everything starts to begin to make a bit of sense. It's we start to believe that, it isn't about what she said and what he's done. And all of a sudden we're deeply affected by what, the world is doing and thinking about us. The bottom line is, I think it don't matter. I think all that matters is that we're able to, act and remain sanely, within our recovery process without being fearful of what things are, about things that are going on and things that we used to believe. And I think it is, I think it gives us a different belief system, and we start to believe that, as time goes on, certain things take place, and I've found that it doesn't the drug problem has been removed, like it says in the book. And I think it's on into where it says into action. We recoil like a hot flame. And for me, that is what it gives you. But I think it all has to be brought about from, wanting and being at a place where it's looking like you've had enough, I think. And yeah, it gives you this change of perspective, change of thinking, and getting out of that battle of wrong thinking, I think, Paul.
Yes, absolutely. And sobriety is a commitment. In step 2, we develop belief and faith and trust that we can be restored to sanity around all the problems that we become aware of and honest about in step 1. The powerlessness and futility of being locked in that cycle of living to use and using to live, ways and means to get more, and the resulting consequences, the unmanageability. So a proper step 1 will have you get honest and transparent and accountable about the reality of your life in drug addiction. In step 2, we come to believe that we can be restored to sanity around drinking drugs. You see, so the faith and trust has to be maintained. So what to do next is to find ways to maintain your sanity. In the first instance, principally around drinking drugs. So how is a member kept sane and sober as regards drinking drugs? Well, we've talked about regular meeting attendance, very important. And we've talked about a support network, very important. A commitment to reading at least a couple of pages of the literature every day, to start at the beginning of the big book and read 2 or 3 pages every day, or more if you've got the time and the will. And keep a bookmark in there and systematically read through the first 164 pages, which is the program. The other 400 pages of the big book are the personal stories, which are great. However, the program is the first 164, and I usually suggest to folk to read through the 164 twice before they systematically, not just dipping in from start to finish, to read the 164, then read it again, and then go into the personal stories at the back as part of the daily program of action. Also to locate some personal spiritual literature, which for me is the scriptures, the word of God, and to read them every day. A Muslim might read the Quran, a Jew might read the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita for a Sikh. Read your personal spiritual literature systematically every day. Page 86 on awakening. We ask God for wisdom, direction, intuition. We admit we're alcoholic. We ask for power and sobriety and wisdom that day on awakening. And we stay prayerful throughout the day. We do a nightly inventory. We review our day, our words and behavior, thoughts, and we see how we're doing, by doing a nightly inventory. So these are things that is the essence of it. And then the other topic, I suppose, Ashley, is hobbies, interests and pastimes. And the reason why this is important is because all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. You have to have other things going on in recovery. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's true, Paul. It's other things, as well as doing the recovery, to as well as doing recovery, but then looking at, when I've got that free time, what can I do, or what needs to be done? It's, and your mind and your thinking starts to feel better. And, I think that you can perhaps look at getting into something that you feel passionate about as well as recovery. And I think this is all part and parcel of recovery, is getting back into things that you once enjoyed, but then the drugs and the thinking of the perception and living the lie, took you away from that. And I believe that it brings you back to this new way of believing that, just being all right with doing simple things, and being all right with getting you, going out for a walk, if it's 10-15 minutes, coming back, if you don't feel all right, go back out again. And just doing things like that, and making something of yourself that you feel that you can achieve more, wanting to do more within recovery as well as doing recovery, but then picking up a hobby, like what Paul was saying. And I'd like to point out that, on this recovery meeting, we do have a nightly inventory meditation meeting, Paul, don't we, as well? So
That's right. Every night at 9:30 is part of the group that we're involved with. We've got 3 meetings every day at 2 p.m., 8 p.m. and 9:30 UK time every day, which is 9 a.m., 3 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. if you're on the East Coast of the Americas. Now, we'll be putting up a meeting screen in a little while, and you're absolutely right. That's a very blessed meeting. It's on every night at 9:30. We have to have purpose, connection, expression. That's what hobbies, interests, pastimes give us. And it can absolutely be walking. Walking is one of the most therapeutic things a person can do. It's great for anger. It's great for boredom. Walking is a very important thing. Nutrition. Many of us come in dehydrated. I would say almost every day. Actually, I'm talking with a young man or a young woman, or an older man, an older woman, that has become malnourished, dehydrated, and not slept for 2 or 3 days because they've been high as a kite and drunk as a lord. And so learning to eat and drink correctly, self-care, is a huge thing about what to do now you've recovered. You've got to start taking care of your body. Your health is your wealth. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's correct, Paul. I think it's, like you said, just taking care of yourself, and just being, just looking out for what you can do to improve your mental well-being, and going to bed at correct times, and just doing all the things that you didn't do, but you become all right with all these new things. And it's just a new way of living, like it says in the book. It's given us this new way of living, new way of thinking. And like what you were mentioning earlier, Paul, being honourable to God, and being willing to get on your knees and ask for God's assistance, but then being prayerful throughout the day, not just in mornings, at night, and doing things that are outlined that we're suggested to do, but just perhaps doing a bit more, or looking at a few more things that take your fancy within recovery. And I think that's that, Paul. Yeah,
change is the only constant in life. You can either change for the better or change for the worse. You know, we have to be willing to try new things. And as you said, we engage with old interests, or perhaps sports, arts, culture, history, entertainment, education, you know, chess, reading, writing. Some folks, I know folks that have taken up writing and had books published in recovery. I know folks that have resumed their interest in art in a younger age and have gone on to produce and sell art in recovery. You know, I've known persons that have taken up new careers, you know, all kinds of things. But either way around, we have to get into action. Now, you know, we all set forth the ideal in meetings. You know, we go in, someone said this to me recently, we go in meetings and it can be a little bit idealistic, you know. And that's because we want to carry a message of hope, faith, and courage in that 1 hour or 1 hour, 20 minutes, whatever the meeting is. You know, and it's quite important to do that because that's what folks need to hear. But at the same time, many of the persons that come to meetings actually have got other complex issues, such as mental health issues, physical health issues, financial problems, self-care problems, domestic problems, career problems. And for many of these persons, they become very isolated, you know, using in their own homes with the doors locked and the curtains drawn. And for such persons to suddenly become responsible, productive members of society would be nothing short of miraculous. Now it does happen, but more often than not, it's a long period of reconstruction. Okay. So by participating in the things we've discussed this morning, you know, they become different folk. But it's absolutely a process, see. And it's the importance of practicing. You know, the liberation comes in the doing, not the thinking or the talking. That's a part of it. So the mind of an alcoholic addict likes to think we can think our way or talk our way into sobriety, but really we live our way into sobriety. You know, that people sometimes, someone said it to me yesterday, why can't I get it? Well, there's no it to get. Oh, I don't know why I can't get it. There's no it. There's no it. What do you mean? You know, I've never been able to get a sufficient answer. I understand their point, you know, but what they really mean, in truth, is the substance of God. Why can't they get the power and the wisdom and the courage of God operative? That's what they're really trying to describe when they say that, and I understand. And it's about what we do. Now, you know, whilst there's 1,001 topics and perspectives on what I'm about to say, I'm a firm believer in personal responsibility for the maintenance of recovery. That is to say, Ashley, if you or me want to stay clean and sober, then there are certain things we must do. We have to get into action and do things. We have to, you know, and there are certain things we mustn't do. You know, say, for example, very often persons begin gambling and then the obsession to drink and drug comes on. Many persons get involved in extramarital affairs and then the obsession to drink and drug is there. I've known persons begin drug dealing whilst clean and ended up back at it. Or, you know, if persons become hateful or arrogant or argumentative or resentful, and then they end up back at it. So they've got to be vigilant about how they live. You know, living clean is much more than being drug-free. You know, it's about keeping a clean heart, free from the bedevilments, you see. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I believe in that as well, Paul. It's, you know, it's steering clear of, life isn't singing and dancing, as they say, but it's what we have to do a few things, in order to be productive members of society and have some responsibility now of being, this new sort of way of life, and being accountable for what I haven't been doing and what I should be doing. And it's all, I think it's all to do with that. doing these, doing a few things and practicing things, and and some action around this, and it sends sort of goose pimples down my body sometimes when I think about it. And I never thought I could sort of relieve this insidious bedevilment, devilness thought of it will be all right. But I believe that if you're prepared to change your life with all these things that we've talked about, and hobbies, and you're ready to be a part of recovery, I truly believe that anyone can be recovered within the 12-step sort of module, Paul, I believe. But
absolutely. I mean, it's about taking action, really. The the chapter you mentioned earlier isn't into thinking or into talking. It's into action, and it's largely what we do that guarantees us the freedom, and learning to enjoy a daily program of action. And taking responsibility for your sobriety is very, very important. I would say at least a couple of times a week, the issue is presented to me of a real person that's suffering from addiction, and they, for whatever reason, have been unable or unwilling to be totally honest with themselves, and they've been back at it and got into terrible scrapes and circumstances through drinking and drugging, and they're like the man in the book, beating on the bar, why has this happened? And of course the answer is that somehow they've failed to be responsible for their sobriety, and they've ended up drunk or high again. You see, now of course we talk about the mental state that precedes a relapse. We talk about the peculiar mental twist, the thinking of an alcoholic addict, of course we do. But I believe that when someone's clean and sober, when they end up drunk or high again, at some point there has to be the acceptance of personal, or the failure of personal responsibility. I really believe that. And I really believe that the myth that persons that drink and drug, and I heard it yesterday, even from a man that I've spent an hour with trying to help to see this personal responsibility for your recovery business. Oh, well, I use because I'm powerless. Well, that's not how I read it. The book says we're powerless in drink or in drugs. So in other words, when you're actually using, you're locked in that futile cycle for them to use you because your body's physically craving more. So your mind caves in and you continue drinking and you're drugging, see, because the body's craving more. But once the stuff's out your system, then it's a problem of the mind, you see. And then when you come to meetings, you hear what the solution is. And then you have an obligation to keep a fit spiritual condition before God. You have to be responsible before God in the power of God, standing on your own 2 feet for your own sobriety. And if you don't do that, you've got to accept personal responsibility for that. Now, I've actually seen lives saved by the realization of this. And once again, there are 1,000 different perspectives on these topics, so this is by no means an exhaustive discussion. However, I worked with a real person who is still clean sober to this day, who would continually, every few weeks, would end up drinking again to the point of being nearly 3/4 dead, unable to walk, barely able to talk, hallucinating, 7 stone, surrounded by filth, wondering what the hell's happened. And they would say, well, it's because they're powerless. Well, how did they pick up the first one? Well, they would say because they're powerless. And I understand the peculiar mental twist and what have you, but we spent hours actually trying to get light about that they made the choice, personal choice. It's a very important principle, I believe, because it's denial. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. If you cut an addict alcoholic open, denial and dishonesty runs through the middle of them. You see, and we justify, we minimize, we maximize, we rationalize, and ultimately it's a form of dishonesty. Now, when it comes to drink and drugs, that's a serious business, which is why the program is one of rigorous honesty. And You know, a lad said to me recently, why do I keep picking up drinking drugs? I said, well, you like getting high. Oh, yeah. So do you like the effects produced? Oh, I see. Yes. You know, another lad yesterday picked up just before the weekend there, Friday, I believe it was. And you know, why did I do it? Well, you know, you wanted to get high. You know, you chose to deceive to get money, and then you went and got high. You know, and it has been said an addict alcoholic that's clean and sober is without a program is like a fish out of water, gasping for air. You see, you've got to get the power of God operative. The steps are about getting connected to God's power. That's what the steps are. The steps are about developing a personal relationship with a personal God, the Creator, you see, that can solve all your problems for you and give you a new way to live. What do you think, Ashley?
Yeah, that's true, Paul. I think it, you know, when it, you know, it's giving you a new way to live, and you know, I think fundamentally, you know, you know, me personally, I liked the effect produced by drugs and alcohol, but I think the bottom line is that I stepped over the mark, and you know, ultimately, I was making these choices to go and use and steal and do all the rest of it that comes with addiction. So I had to kind of take some responsibility within recovery to look at this and think, you know, this can't keep going on. I really want to kind of do something else around the right thing. And I think that's what it boils down to. I believe that, you know, because I've, you know, done it, and I've got the experience to kind of identify with people and what they say within recovery. You know, I didn't want to use, but I think, like what you were saying, Paul, fundamentally, that you went and used because you like the feeling of getting high. And I think that's when it becomes the choice, whether you get a choice, I believe, when you're in a position in recovery. You know the score with it all, don't you? I think, Paul.
Well, that's right, because you're in the midst of persons that have discovered the solution. You know, that are easily able to control their urges to drink and drug. You see, you're sticking with the winners. You know, now if nothing changes, nothing changes. Persons have to change. You know, and as I've said, a lot of the folks in early recovery have got complex life problems as well as physical problems as a part of that. So, you know, in probably a third to half of the cases, the persons need to learn to eat properly. You know, you need to think about what you're going to wear. And another point as well, actually, that's well worthy of making, you know, and psychiatry proves this with tests, that persons that don't have sufficient food in their home for a few days, persons that don't have clean clothing hanging up or in the drawers ready, persons that don't have a tidy home, the absence of these three things tends towards mental problems. The presence of these three things, sufficient food, sufficient clean clothing, tidy home, tends towards mental health. So mental health is a huge part of this. You know, conversely, some folks come into recovery and their minds and homes are still okay. You see, so you get all different types. But you have to be ready to cover all bases. And of course, I guess I'm speaking from somebody who's working with these persons every day, Ashley. You know,
Yeah.
that's been my experience. You know, you can sing and dance about the book and the steps all you like, but if they're not eating properly and they're sitting in an untidy home, dirty and miserable with no friends, then they need more than just the theory. They need to change, you
Yeah.
know, and you have your work cut out working with such persons. You know, you can tub thump all day long about the book and the steps, but if they're in deep depression, despair, and unhappiness, it's going to be difficult for them. You know, particularly if they're not getting to face meeting.
Yeah, and I think, like you're saying, Paul, they perhaps need a bit more assistance within. You know, I think they just need a bit more assistance with other outside issues to bring them to light of, being part of recovery. And, I think it all boils down to that support network. Maybe the person's is, like you said, they haven't got much food, or they're not clothed well, or they're not sleeping well. So maybe recovery is the first instance, and then looking at other things to make their life a bit more manageable, and then recovery becomes a bit more sort of accessible, I suppose.
Absolutely, quite so. I absolutely believe that anyone can get clean and sober and find a new way to live. Learning to live clean is a process, not an event. And my heart goes out to anyone that may be listening to this, Ashley, that's in early recovery or not even clean yet. There are lots of things to address, but it begins with abstinence. Many an addict or a prospective member of CA, AA, or NA disidentifies and puts themselves off the idea of recovery for this reason or for that reason. What about this? What about that? Usually we have to get into abstinence, and then our other problems, God gives us the power and the wisdom to be able to address them. We can then begin to address our consequences. Fear is a terrible master. Many an addict, alcoholic stays drinking and drugging because they're fearful of being clean and sober. And many an addict, alcoholic that is clean and sober is fearful of remaining clean and sober and ends up drinking and drugging again. You see, and fear is about confusion. And when folks are confused, they can become deceived and deluded. So it's a very subtle thing. Alcoholism, addiction. So persons often need some extra support to learn how to sort out their thinking. And as part of the steps, persons clean house. We trust God, clean house, and then help others. We look at things we resent in persons or institutions we resent. We look at our fears, and we look at persons we've harmed, and we make amends. And then we learn to re-engage with society. What do you think?
Yeah, that's that is what happens to us. I believe we become accountable for what we're prepared to do in recovery. We make a list of all persons we'd harmed and became became willing to make amends to, and we start looking at these things and being like we were saying earlier, responsible sort of people, and people start taking us seriously again, and like what you were saying, if we're in a mindset of where things aren't going right, addiction and that using mentality, I think it becomes it's not even negotiable. You'll just, from my experience, it's there waiting for me to go and do it. But if we build this positive recovery, thinking and being, we start thinking differently, I think, Paul.
That's right. Would you oblige by reading the last two paragraphs, the last bit there on the screen?
Yeah, I'll read that. Is it Abandon Yourself to God?
No, our book.
Okay. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realise we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you, to us, and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order, but obviously you cannot transmit something that you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road to happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
That was great. Thanks, Ashley. I was muted there. Sorry.
It's all right, Paul.
Thanks very much for reading that. Beautiful. So on the screen now is our meeting screen. There are lots and lots of other meetings. Please feel free to take a screenshot of this. So the CA UK helpline number is at the bottom right there. There's the meetings in green are on every single day. Me and Ashley are part of a group called We Can Recover that meets 3 times every single day, 2 p.m., 8 p.m. and 9:30. In that same meeting ID there, 971 721 4725. There are lots and lots of other meetings. If you wish to go to cocainoneness.org.uk, you can find out about face-to-face meetings in Britain that are on every day. You can also read pamphlets and get lots more information about sobriety. You can also find out about lots of online meetings that are on. So my strong suggestion, particularly as part of now I've recovered, what next? Get involved in a meeting, find yourself a home group, ideally face-to-face and online. Come along and hear the message of hope. If you've never been to a Zoom meeting, nobody is required to put the camera on and nobody is required to even talk. You're more than welcome to come along and just listen. Conversely, if you want to share, everyone gets a chance to share. So, please come along to a meeting. So without further ado, Ashley, in summary, let's just both take a minute or two to summarize our thoughts on this topic. What are you going to do next in your sobriety?
Yeah, so I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you, Paul, for me attending this podcast. But yeah, the opportunities that I'm going to do in my recovery, I think, as being a recovered addict, is, to constantly do these suggestive things and, the meetings, as we talked about, support network, enlightening my thought process and, constantly getting in with the book, with other people and improving what I can do as part of a responsible person within recovery, Paul, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, to anyone that's listening to this, please check out the podcast. As I say, get involved in the conversation wherever you see this posted and reach out. Our message is hope, our promise is freedom, that any addict can quit using, lose the desire to use and find a brand new way to live. Sobriety is possible. You never need to drink and drug again. To anyone that may be drifting, reconnect with the Creator, pop along to meetings, commit yourself to a home group and get some service and read the literature on a daily basis. Recovery is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm working on step 8 and 9 today. I've got another service commitment later, and it's always a pleasure to share with you, Ashley. So thanks so much for coming along today. So without further ado, stay strong, family. And once again, thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, cheers, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, good stuff. Bye-bye.